Hello and welcome back to the polling station. This is a quick fire special to recap the first GOP presidential debate, which took place this morning or late last night, depending on how you call it. And as you know by now, it took place without the overwhelming favorite for the nomination because Donald Trump decided not to stay home, but to go and see who else, Tucker Carlson, and do a 45-minute long interview on Twitter, which I am not calling X. He is still the very heavy favorite for the nomination. We've had quite a few changes since we last talked about this, because Vivek Ramaswamy is now second favorite, whilst Ron DeSantis is third favorite for the Republican nomination. You can get 6-1 Vivek, 8 Ron DeSantis. It's 22-1 bar. Now, there were quite a few contenders who were on the stage yesterday. We're going to just talk through basically everything from the debate, me and, of course, a friend of the show, Paul Krishnamurty, with some takeaways, some thoughts on the future. And then, of course, he might dip in to see what Trump and Carlson had to get up to whilst the debate was ongoing. Paul, how are you?
Very well, Will. Very well. Yourself?
I am doing just fine. So, debate, we'll get straight into it. Who are your big winners and losers?
Well, I just want to start by saying, I think anybody betting on at this stage of a primary debate on one party, it's difficult because you're having to absolutely shed your own skin, right? Okay, I'm not a Republican, so I'm trying to look at it from how does a Republican vote it. When you're watching a debate, especially a passionate one like that, you just are inclined to just jump behind the people you agree with. And from that point of view, I thought that Pence did very well, and I thought Haley did very well, right? But I wonder whether that works with a GOP electorate. I noticed the market has not given any credit to DeSantis. I thought Ron DeSantis did well. Again, look, this is my absolute direct opposite politics to mine. But I thought that in terms of what he had to do on the debate stage, he did it. He talked about results. He didn't get dragged into the Trump business, right, which is sensible on his part. The only problem for him is he faces being upstaged by this, the 2024 version of Trump in 2016, what Chris Christie called the ChatGPT candidate in Vivek Ramaswamy, who is just a whirlwind of noise, a whirlwind of, I would say, ridiculous anti-American, pro-Russian talking points, just like Trump. But he forces the reaction from the other side, and what you saw was a lot of shouting back and forth between them. And I can't help but think that from him and his network's point of view, that's probably good, because the upshot is nobody's going to make any big inroads against Trump from this. Trump will remain heavily odds on to be the nominee, although there are problems with that, which I'm sure we'll discuss. And I think Ramaswamy is going to be his vice president. He was crystal clear he will pardon Trump when Pence said, look, I've dealt with the pardon process at state level, at federal level. And you only get a pardon when you firstly accept your guilt to a crime and secondly show remorse, leaving it open that who on earth thinks Trump will do either of those things, right? But Vivek is saying, no matter, I will pardon him no matter what, which I think puts him in absolute pole position for VP. The question I would have is whether the rest of their attacks on him, that he's a lightweight, that his foreign policy is ridiculous, cut through. We'll see.
Yeah, really interesting points on how the candidates land with the GOP as compared to how they come across. I thought Pence outperformed my expectations of him. I think he held his ground quite well. I think also he was able to appear quite robust. Quite a few of these candidates who have taken a different line to Trump, etc., on things such as January 6th, Ukraine, climate change, etc., can get buffeted around and bullied a bit. That didn't really happen to Pence. So I think he had a decent night. I think the biggest winner was Trump for a couple of reasons. Namely, his acolyte is now second in the polls, and that direction of travel doesn't appear to be stopping at the moment. I would doubt whether Vivek will lose momentum. I think he'll probably gain a bit of momentum. And of course, he went and did the Tucker Carlson interview where he said Tucker Carlson things and Carlson asked Tucker Carlson questions. And that seemed to go well for him. I think DeSantis, it is difficult to know really what's a victory for him because of where he started. So he's obviously taken this big downswing, and we've heard lots of issues from inside the campaign, and he has not come across with, I'm going to use a very young people word, right? But Trump, love him or loathe him, is politics, right? He's got the ability to connect with the GOP common man and woman voter. Listen, I'm not saying it makes him authentic or whatever, but he is a people person who comes to it. That's been a big failing of DeSantis so far. I think DeSantis debates better than he does when he comes across on the stump. But what does he need for like a successful set of debates or to advance his position? It's very different, I think, from say Pence or Vivek. Vivek basically just needs not to have his stand combust and blow up in front of him. He is going to take a lot of the crossfire, but he is a noise detention candidate. And like you say, it's a completely different set of rules. If you flip this, say, and it was like, say, RFK debating a bunch of like 6 or 7 Democrat senators and the same things had happened, I would wager he would lose support and it would be a bad night. But the same thing could happen to Vivek and it's relatively good. So I have him in my winners list along with, I think, Pence and I think Haley as well. Although the only thing is, debate-wise is one thing, but the paths forward are not. And I think I said a little while back, mushed up all my words there. The really tricky thing is going to be the lanes, right? Trump has all of his people in there. Vivek is siphoning off like the Trump adjacents. The path is really narrow for what you would say is, in GOP terms here strictly, so that nobody misunderstands me, a moderate, and you may be trying to squeeze through like 3 or 4 candidates, Pence, Haley. Tim Scott is trying to be nice guy, so I don't know where he goes, all into that lane. DeSantis is getting blown out the water recently by Vivek's sort of hype train. So I think, if anything, this sort of underlying the status quo going forward rather than made any big changes to it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have to look at last night as being the start of it. I don't think it is realistic. I don't think you can read very much into what has happened in the last few months. And to take like the sort of stick that DeSantis is coming for, a lot of this is inevitable. He's the front runner. He's got the Trump machine after him. You know, the Trump machine is pro-Vivek, anti-DeSantis, right? So you've got all these talking points. Every little tiny misstep, however it can be interpreted, is amplified about DeSantis. But then we've seen one poll recently that is really worthy of attention, which was the Iowa Seltzer poll, right? Seltzer's polls in Iowa are gold. They're as valuable as any poll you're likely to see. And there he was, clearly in second place behind Trump, who wasn't in an overwhelming position, was well below 50%, which going into Iowa is a big worry, I would say. I would say Trump is beatable in Iowa. And DeSantis looks the obvious beneficiary, and he fares better amongst Trump voters as an alternative. I do think that there's a whole process yet to play out. The legal situation it's unprecedented, and it's impossible to confidently predict how this plays out. There's this assumption that because the polls say, oh, well, the Republican base don't care that Trump's going to be indicted. Let's see. How engaged are they? How engaged are these like 75 million voters, right? And when they see that actually he's being charged with basically illegally taking classified documents about the country nuclear secrets and potentially showing them to other people and selling them, right? When they see that Jack Smith's indictments are they're absolutely rock solid. You've just got to read the detail. They're going to get them right. When you see that so many of his co-defendants in Georgia are broke and not being bailed out by the Trump machine. So they're probably likely to flip, and we've already seen that. All of this is going to make an impact on the race as we go along. I don't think it has really yet because it's too early, right? But once you get close to Iowa, this gets competitive. And I think that if DeSantis is standing there in the other corner and saying, on every single issue, yeah, I agree, let's be tougher, let's be harder. I've already done it. I've got the record in Florida. I've won the election doing that. That's a hell of a strong position. Whatever, snide comments, whatever people have about his opponents have about his personality or whatever. I mean, I'm not sure that matters. I've seen all that with Ted Cruz in 2016. There's a lot of similarities with all that. And again, Cruz was kind of dismissed because, oh, well, he's too right-wing. He's going to alienate the general election voter. But that's irrelevant in the primary. And actually, Cruz could have won that race tactically if the tactics of the anti-Trump people had been correct. They could have stopped Trump then. And it wouldn't shock me at all if they stop him now.
Hey, interesting. And actually a very good point about the distance left in this. It's sort of like a modern Grand National. Everybody says about the Grand National, oh, you want to hunt through the pack, or whatever, and like plot your way through. When actually for punters, and particularly sort of for the horse race metaphor, you can get sort of really convinced into being, you got to be in the van, and you forget sort of how much time there is in this race. We're barely close to getting around the first circuit, actually, which is something I think to remember. I can't believe I'm asking this question. I never thought I would, even in public. So forgive me, Paul. Did you watch any of the Trump Carlson interview?
And I didn't have a chance. Obviously, it was 4 a.m. was finished, so I didn't. I'm going to watch it though this afternoon. I've seen little clips, and I've seen him when asked by Tucker, "Do you think civil war's coming?" He prevaricates, and I think again, this is the backdrop to this election, which is so terrifying, but also interesting, and also such a known unknown. And I don't think in the UK this comes across the way our media report American politics, the failures on that front. People just don't realise it. We are going into a situation where you have a network of people who are really clearly coordinating. I mean, the interview with Tucker being hyped up by Musk all day and put on X. I mean, come on, X. I mean, come on. It's obviously a strategy, right, to undermine rivals, etc. And it's obvious that Trump and Vivek are coordinating, just as all of the surrogate accounts on Twitter are easy to identify. And what we're going into is a situation where one side of that is basically going to say, we don't accept the election, like result. We're not going to accept the one going forward. We're not going to accept that hundreds of people are in prison for an insurrection. We're just not going to call it an insurrection. We're going to call it a witch hunt. And on a regular basis, Trump supporters are going to be arrested for hoarding guns, for death threats, etc. It's happened already several times. Right? This is going to go on for a year. And on the other hand, you have people who, however much they have maybe far-right politicians, maybe they're got politics that seem alien to Britain, like Ron DeSantis, right? But people like Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Mike Pence are nonetheless mainstream, relatively competent politicians, right? They wouldn't go into an election saying, let's have a civil war, right? They would find a way of answering that question that try to at least pretend they wanted to bring the country together. Trump won't. And I kind of think that is not only incredibly dangerous for the primary, but it's suicidal for the general election. It's absolutely suicidal.
Indeed, agree. We've talked about that plenty. I think that's a pretty good place to end this GOP recap. Just quickly, have you had anything change your mind in particular, or do you think it's sort of an as we were situation with regard to anything in the overall markets?
It's reinforced two positions I have. One is that I think that, frankly, the Democrats were a really good bet for the presidency because also, I mean, we could talk about it another time at greater depth. But when you look at the Electoral College, they should be favourites. It's just a big, big ask for Trump to get those states back, especially in Georgia where he's been charged. And if he loses Georgia, he's in trouble. So I'm still very much on that point. Back the Democrat candidates, Labour Republicans. But also, just regarding to how this horse race pans out, I think I have backed Mike Pence at 100 to 1 and bigger for the nominee. I think this is a bet because I think that this field will whittle down, right? A lot of these candidates will, if Trump remains in front, they will endorse him. I don't think Pence will. I think Pence will stay in this for the long haul. I think Christie can't really make much headway, and the Christie supporters will go over to him. Possibly some of the Haley supporters, possibly some of the Scott supporters. Pence is building. He should be building a brand anyway of basically saying, "I'm the guy who saved the country. I'm the patriot." There's a quote in one of the indictments that Trump said to him, "Mike, you're too honest." Right. Well, Pence should be getting a T-shirt of that, mocked up of that. And I can just see a situation where we get to about February or March, there's only 2 or 3 people left in it. Trump's well ahead, but Pence is now in second because DeSantis might at some point pull out because he's not doing it and endorse Trump. Then wouldn't you want to be on at 100 to 1 in that situation where it boils down to a 2 or 3 runner race and there's still a massive chance that Trump is taken off the ballot later on?
Okay. Good place to end. Thanks for your time, Paul.
Pleasure, everyone.
And thank you very much for watching this episode of The Polling Station. In the show notes, I will also put a link to a story just charting the rise of Vivek Ramaswamy in the GOP polling odds. Thanks very much and have a great day.
We are right in the heart of Mayfair, 36 Curzon Street, next to the famous Curzon Cinema. Across 2 floors, you can find 2 price finders, 5 digital form touchscreens, and a 38-screen customisable high-spec TV system. Myself and my team would love you to come and join us at Curzon Street and check out what we've got.